The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
You know, I'm not going to play the song, but, you know, just kind of in your head, have the Carpenters' We May Never Walk This Way Again in your minds as we talk about locker cleanout yesterday at Ashburn. And unlike years ago where players stayed around, there's free agency, there's roster upgrades, there's the draft, there's all those different things that are going to make for a big roster turnover next year. Maybe not as big as the one they had this year, but yesterday was sort of like the last day of school in Ashburn as the players cleaned out their lockers, melancholy, because they had done so much this year but came short of their goal. But there's so much hope for next year. It's just a question of who's going to be around for next year. And along with that yesterday was the news conference, the joint news conference. And all that lasted about 20 minutes. It was Dan Quinn and Adam Peters together answering questions as best they could. I think they were a little evasive on certain things. But, you know, it's a year that nobody could have imagined. I don't think any of us thought we'd be into the last week of January and still watching this team play and being, I don't want to say disappointed, but, you know, feeling kind of sad that they're not going to be in the Super Bowl. I think if you said to most people, hey, they're going to be in the NFC Championship game, one of 4 teams remaining, everybody would be euphoric. It would be cause for celebration. But I guess the best perspective on the locker cleanout yesterday came from Olamide Zaccheaus, who is one of the offseason free agent signings, came from the Philadelphia Eagles, had some experience with Dan Quinn in Atlanta. I don't know whether he's going to be back next year or not, but they asked him to reflect on this season versus the previous seasons he's played in the league. And he said, honestly, packing all my stuff, he didn't say stuff, it was another S word, that's the hardest part. There's a couple of tough things, but for me personally, it's just packing. I hate packing. And I would go along with that. I do not like to move. I've moved several times in my life. It's always a pain in the tuchus, and I think he expressed that pretty well, that, he hates that part of it. But the bigger issue is that what they set out to do this year, I would say, was a grand slam. They did what they had hoped to do in establishing, you know, the culture, although Dan Quinn didn't really use the word culture that much. He used identity. And when some of us snickered when he said we recalibrate, we don't rebuild, I think he fulfilled that promise as well. And the recalibrating and the expectations of the fans is enormous. You know, when is the last time that you went into an off season and said, you know, if a lot of things go right next year, they could be in the Super Bowl? That's entirely possible. They came up one step short. You know, it may be that they flame out in the first round of the playoffs, and maybe so that injuries take over this team, as happens from time to time, and like the Cincinnati Bengals, who have one of the great quarterbacks in the league in Joe Burrow and don't make the playoffs. That's possible. But the fact of the matter is they got a squad now. It's been a long time since they had a squad, and they have a squad that's based on their quarterback. I mean, I think that's more than anything else, it's Jaden Daniels. And he was the 6th rookie quarterback to take a team to the NFC Championship game. But of the other 5, there was nobody close to him in shouldering this team. I mean, the teams that went to the NFC Championship games with rookie quarterbacks had top 3 defenses. This is one of the worst defenses in the league, and their weakness against the run showed big time on Sunday when they gave up over 220 yards, and Saquon Barkley ripped through them, including the first play when he ran 60 yards for a touchdown. But what Jaden Daniels did this year, he gave this city hope, and I think it's a different kind of hope than we had with Robert Griffin III, although maybe at this point there was similar hope. But he was coming off a very serious knee injury that was going to take the offseason to rehab, and there were other things about him that were, you know, a little bit troubling, like he was running an offense that he clearly didn't want to run anymore. He said so to his coach. And he wanted to instantly become Aaron Rodgers without putting in all the classroom work that's necessary to do that. I don't think we see any of that with Jaden Daniels. We see a humbleness, which we did not see with Robert Griffin III. So it's all different now. And what Tom Loverro writes in his column today, he says, the sports world marveled at Daniels' record-setting winning performances week after week. Last-minute victories driven by his arms, his legs, and his heart. The winning football in critical moments that Dan Quinn hoped for when training camp began. On Sunday, America was lighting candles for Daniels. We learned the limits of the weight that he can carry. He can't put it all on his shoulders for a team that turns the ball over 4 times. He can't save an offense and a defense that commits damaging penalties on the road against a better team. We got more evidence, substantial, given that it came in defeat, of the faith that Daniels has in himself, a faith that spread throughout the locker room. He was, according to reports, visibly shaken by the loss. We believe we belong here, Daniels told reporters. I don't ever want to feel this way again, but you got to deal with it and move on. That's your identity, Loverro writes. Daniels believed his Commanders would beat the Eagles, and if his teammates didn't implode with turnovers and costly penalties, who is to say they wouldn't have? And that's really what Dan Quinn was trying to bring here at the beginning of the season. And now he's got a season to look back on with something else that Tressway explained in the locker cleanout yesterday.
Coach encouraged us with something cool. We talked about like we now have scars, and like we did a lot of things this year. We have a lot of memories, but now we have our first scars. And you know, anybody that's got scars, it always comes with a story, and it hurts, and you end up learning a lot from it. And I thought that was a really cool message.
Yeah, and this is exactly how Quinn opened up his news conference yesterday. It was a joint news conference with Adam Peters, with both of them making an opening statement, with Quinn going first.
Our team has a lot going for it. They've got brotherhood and toughness and work ethic, and there's just one thing we didn't have, and we just got it last night, and those are scars. And you can't get them when you first huddle up, and you got to earn them, and as sure as hell don't want to, but you do need them to grow. And you truly don't know who you are until you get your ass knocked down and see how you get back up. And if I knew anything about our team, they will absolutely get up swinging. And so as AP and I, we can sit up here and point to every great win this game has given us, but I know we'd also spend more time on the losses, and that we still ain't over years later. But all of them led to he and I being here together, and together I wouldn't want to ride strong with anybody else. And so he's been an amazing partner for me all the way through, and so a lot to be thankful for our team. I'm not there yet. I will be one day, but I'm not there today. So all that said, I'll kick it over to Adam, and he'll kick on, then we'll get rocking with you guys.
Yeah, not a ton to add. Just really, you know, like you said, it still stings. We're just still going through it right now. But I can say that although it's not where we want to be right here, sitting next to each other, I'm proud to be sitting next to you, and really proud of this team and what they did and this group of men, and just really thankful for them and how much work they put in, and just really a lot of gratitude today for that group. And you know, just that's probably the best way to say it. Just a lot of gratitude, and disappointing ending, but very grateful for everybody.
So that is how they began. It's about a 20-minute news conference yesterday. There'll be more coming up. They've got the combine and free agency and the draft and all that stuff, so we'll hear from them again in the off season. But what you heard there from Dan Quinn, I think, is significant about how the losses really stay with you much longer than the wins. And the great winners that I've gotten to know over the years, like John Thompson and Gary Williams, and maybe a little bit Joe Gibbs, that's what they talk about. They talk about the stinging losses more than the wins. Those stick with you. It's great to have the wins, and it's great to have the hardware, the trophies, the rings, the whole thing. But when you look back, if you're a real competitor like these guys are, that's what bothers you, the losses. And, you know, you hear that. It's kind of trite. Oh, this will stay with us. It'll sting for a while. We'll thrive off of this. We'll see. One of the other things, by the way, that I'm not going to – there's no audio that I'm going to play here from this, but Quinn was asked about the fact that this team is, you know, seemingly further ahead than anybody could have expected. Would that change his approach in the offseason on free agency? I think it probably will, but he's saying every year you start from ground zero. You assess your team, you try to make it better. You don't think about, you know, can we get really good fast? And the clock really isn't ticking very fast because they're going to have Jaden Daniels under a rookie contract for 3 more years and then the 5th-year option. So they've got time here, and you don't have to run out and do things, which they may have done a little bit, and we'll see how it plays out over the next, well, certainly the next year. It's 2 years left on Lattimore's contract, neither one guaranteed, but if they cut him, it's an $18 million cap hit. And I wonder if he's going to be back. And the reporters kind of waded into this yesterday with Peters, like, what'd you think here? Like, is there any indication that he's going to be released after you gave up 2 medium-round draft picks to get him from the Saints at the deadline, not to mention picking up the contract? But Peters, it's just his move, so he may be a little bit defensive about it. I don't know. But this is Peters on the Lattimore situation, and this does not sound like he's going to be released in the offseason.
He came into a tough situation. He did, and he was injured when he got here. And so anytime you come into a new team and you're injured, it's really hard to integrate, and plus you're coming in at the end of the season. So at the same time, you're rehabbing, you're learning a new defense, you're trying to meet new teammates, and so it was a tough situation for him to come in. But what was cool was, we saw him get better, and we saw him get more acclimated, not only to the defense but to his teammates. And so really excited for him to have an off season with us and really learn the defense from the ground up and really have that full runway of training camp and leading into the season, and looking forward to that.
Well, this may turn out to be a big mistake, which happens. It's not an exact science. Sometimes you get the right guy, sometimes you don't. I would say so far this gets a C-. There are games that he played okay. He was hurt a lot. He lost his cool in Philadelphia. You can't pin the whole loss on him, but there were times when he could have been a better contributor. So sounds like they're going to ride with him at least for next year, and we'll see what happens. There is one job left open with the Cowboys doing what they did on Friday night. They hired Kurt Schottenheimer. Marty's kid is going to be the head coach of the Cowboys. That leaves the Saints as the only opening right now. There's reason to believe that Mike McCarthy, who wasn't renewed by the Cowboys, is going to take that job. He's got ties there. But, now that Kingsbury is free to talk, now that the season is over, Cliff Kingsbury, he may be in consideration. And Peters was asked, what about his future, looking for some kind of a clue that maybe one of the big reasons, maybe 50% of the reason that Jaden Daniels developed the way he did was the work he had with Cliff Kingsbury. I know they'd like to see him back. Peters understands, though, that, he's a guy who's been a head coach before, and off of what he did with the young quarterback, which is what everybody wants, to develop the young guy, he's going to be in demand.
I thought he did a fantastic job, and I thought he really he led well. He had great energy. He listened. He was, obviously the performance was outstanding. He's a great play caller, but I think just really being able to – I've known Cliff since I was 23, and so I've known him a long time. I never worked next to him, and just to see how hard of a worker he is and how tireless he is. He's here, 3 a.m. I think. I didn't beat him in once. Tried to, couldn't do it. And how much he cares about this team and the guys in that room was really really special to see. And I'm sure his time's coming soon.
Yeah, it could be this time. I don't know. I would think that the Saints will fill this week. I would be surprised if they don't, but they may be waiting for more interviews, and it may be until they complete the process with Kingsbury. But in terms of money, it doesn't make any sense for him to go to New Orleans if he doesn't really like it, because he's being paid as a head coach from the Cardinals for I think it's another 2 years. So he's got head coach money while he works as the offensive coordinator here. And then Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is 34 years old. I think one of the big reasons he's here is because of Kingsbury. They had worked together in Arizona, had a good relationship. He was unhappy when Kingsbury got fired. Then he hurt his knee halfway through last season, or this 2023 season, and then has had sort of a resurgence here with the Commanders. If there's any doubt whether he's going to play again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be here, but he put that to bed yesterday and saying, "Oh no, I'm not retiring."
Playing with Jaden was extremely fun. It was a 1 year so far. But I feel like we're just scratching the surface as a quarterback and tight end combination. I don't know what the future holds. I still want to play football next year, so that I just want to make that clear that I'm not retiring. Just because I had so much fun this year, I feel rejuvenated. I feel young. This is the most amount of games I played in the season at 34, and I felt like I played good football this year. So for me, it's just figuring out everything going forward, and they know how I feel about this place.
Yeah, and I don't know how much this matters, but he does still have ties to Philadelphia. Played there a long time. This is close to Philadelphia. Only city to be closer, I guess, is Baltimore. So I would think that there are a lot of things pointing in the direction of Ertz coming back here, but it's a business, and if they find that there's a better option at tight end, they'll bring him back. They'll bring somebody else in. That's just the way football works. But I would think that he would stay here, and I don't think he's going to stay for way below market value. They have money under the cap, so they'll, I think he's got an understanding of things. But I would be surprised, based on that comment, that he wants to play again if he's playing someplace else next year. That would surprise me. I expect to see him back here. Coming up, the fans. Remember how Joe Gibbs used to court the fans? We need all of our fans out there. Well, there's a little bit of a nod of the cap to the fans from yesterday's locker cleanout. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We're going to get back to all the locker cleanout stuff and the other football stuff from yesterday, reaction and all that. I just wanted to make mention of this. It's probably something you don't even care about, and I'm having a really difficult time caring about this. Whatever I pay for cable TV was at one point based on my ability to watch Wizards games, or partly based on that. I like to watch local teams, the Nats. I'm not a big hockey fan, but I will watch the Caps in the playoffs. And so the Wizards on TV, especially when Buck and Chenier did it, I would watch at least part of every game, almost every game. And now you can't watch. It's just, you turn it on in the first quarter, they're already down by 15 points. And they had another yawner of a game last night. They lost at Dallas 130-108. And I'm just noticing this from the Post, which, yes, I get delivered every day. And I do read the headlines on the stories. I know the writers don't write the headlines. His name, Varun Shankar, is I guess the new beat reporter for the team. And I'm sure he'd be glad to know that at least my eyeballs were on his story. But the headline is, Keefe's fire fuels a team still learning how to win. Yeah, well, they're 6-39. Last night's yawner of a loss in Dallas, 130-108, was their 14th straight. And it's a professional basketball team. And I know, fan base, and I know we want this. We want them to be bad so that they can be good. And we want the ping pong balls to land properly so that they can draft Cooper Flag. I get all that. But it's just, it's not a minor league team. If you're following a minor league team that's an affiliate of your favorite major league team, you don't really care about their record. You just want to see the development of players. This is about the coach who's not going to be here when the team is any good. Brian Keefe's a career assistant. They knew they were going to stink. And he apparently had a good relationship with Kevin Durant when he worked in Oklahoma City. So maybe he's good at developing young players, young guys who are going to be stars. I don't think they have that. The closest thing to that is Kyle Kuzma, who they're probably going to trade at the deadline, which is shortly. I think it's February 6th, I think is when it is. So, but it's just, now, to be fair on going to the games, not that you'd buy them from the box office. If you go on StubHub or any of these sites, like, for example, this game tomorrow night against Toronto, you can buy a pair of tickets for $24. I just checked. So you can get in to see this team cheaply. There is that. But it's not a major league product. It's not NBA quality. And to have headlines that say, oh, the coach gets fiery at times, great. What does that do for me? And then occasionally, you'll see, oh, Alex Sarr, he's developing. Okay, great. Bilal Coulibaly getting better. Fine. But as they get better, the team still stinks. And with 6 wins to get to 9, I think, which is the lowest ever. I think the Wizards had 15 last year. They're not going to get 15 this year. To get to 9, they got to win 3 games the rest of the way. That's not going to be easy. This is so. Anyway, I know. It's the process. You signed up for the process. You hope you're going to be good. But Philadelphia went through that, and they haven't been in the finals, and they're struggling again. And Joel Embiid, who they built everything around, he's hurt all the time. And when he does play, he doesn't play back-to-backs. There's no guarantees in any of this. And it's a product that, man, I just think people look at and go, oh, okay, yeah. What's the latest loss? How many in a row? What's the record? Whereas the Caps, I thought this season would be all about Alex Ovechkin and chasing the Gretzky record, which it is in many ways, but it's also about winning. They're tied for the best record in the league, and they've won 2 of their first 3 games on this grueling Western road trip, and we'll try to get it done tonight in Calgary. And of course, continue to hope that Alex Ovechkin gets closer and closer. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it this year. He's still 20 away. But even with the broken leg where he missed 6 weeks, he's been phenomenal this year. All right, Ross Tucker, I think, is one of the really sharp voices on the NFL, spends a lot of time studying it, and based in Pennsylvania, so closer to the Eagles. I think he does their preseason games on TV. He's been doing a lot of games for Fox, and he's got his own podcast and everything. So he's on Dan Patrick's show yesterday, and they got around to the future of the Washington Commanders.
A lot of the guys they brought in this year with the new GM, Adam Peters, they panned out. I mean, you think about Frankie Louvu, awesome. Bringing in guys like Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin did a lot of good things. The draft picks, I mean, Jaden Daniels obviously a home run, but how about Sainer still in the second round? And they traded down in the second round to get Sainer still. So if you're a Commanders fan right now, you know that the future is bright, and you were just outgunned yesterday. I mean, I talked to, prepping for the game, Dan, I talked to, 3 or 4 personnel executives. Depending on who I spoke to, they said between 3 to 5 Commanders would start for the Eagles.
Oh.
I mean, think about that. Jonathan Allen would start next to Jalen Carter. Louvu would start next to Zach Bond. Obviously, Jaden Daniels would start, although Hurts played very well. But the fact remains, it's hard to win a game if you only have 3 to 5 guys that would even start for the other team. The Eagles are just that loaded. And then you have the fumbles, and Hurts plays the best he has. I mean, good luck. I mean, that's how you lose by 30 points.
And I loved on ESPN.com yesterday a long article about Daniel Snyder and how he's miserable. Imagine you get $6 billion and you on your yacht somewhere in the south of France and you're watching this and he's miserable because they succeeded once they got rid of you. God, wouldn't you love to have a camera on him as he's watching the Commanders on his yacht? Oh.
I said this before the game yesterday. I would have paid money for a Dan Snyder cast, or have him come to the game and give him a box. Give him a box for free and give him the Taylor Swift treatment. Like every time the Chiefs score or something happens, they show Taylor Swift in the suite. Every time the Commanders do something well or Jaden Daniels runs for a touchdown, show Dan Snyder just like throwing his pen and being all upset. I mean, the timing of this, it's just incredible. It really is. I'm so excited. I played there twice. You can see, Dan, the 2 helmets behind me.
Yeah.
I started my career there and finished it there. So I'm just so happy for those people down there. I mean, when I was there, and you know this, but when I was there, they had like a big season ticket waiting list. It was cool to play for the Redskins, right? I went to a game a couple years ago. The stadium was a half full, and out of the half people that are there, half of them were for the other team. I mean, I've never seen in pro sports that erosion of a fan base. They have single-handedly brought it back now with Jaden Daniels. I'm thrilled for those people down there.
Well, it's not all Jaden Daniels. It's a lot of addition by subtraction of Dan Snyder. And we went through the long piece that was written by Seth Wickersham and Don Van Nana yesterday, which has a quote in the lead that draws you in. It's the question of how Dan Snyder is handling the success of the team. And a confidant said he effing hates it. And it also detailed a bunch of Snyder-like stuff, like he was refusing to sell the team at the last minute, even though he'd agreed to it, by refusing to turn over the numbers for his account so that they could put the money in. And it took Joe Gibbs to talk him into it to get out. Oh, my God. And that's a good idea that Tucker has about the Snyder cam, to have not that he'd agree to this, but to have a camera on Snyder while watching the game. I'm not even sure he watched the game, because I think all this talk about, lifelong fan, lived and died with every play, I think it's a bunch of garbage. I don't think he knew anything about football. If he knew anything about football, he knew that meddling owners never worked. And what he didn't know, he couldn't understand. He didn't know what he didn't know, I guess is the way to put it. And as far as the camera goes on him, in the early days that he owned the team, because he was such a lightning rod, because he had angered so many people, and because he had talked so big the day he bought the team, I'm going to win, that as the team was struggling in those early days, the camera would be on him in the box. And it got to the point where he had said something to the networks, I don't want the camera on me anymore. And in that last season that he owned the team, 2022, because, again, the sale didn't go through until that summer, till the summer of 2023. And there was some gray area as to whether or not he was allowed to be at the games. And he, what I'm told, was in his box and would know when the cameras were on and make sure that, he wasn't available to be seen there. It was just a messy mess. And I just laugh at the Snyder cam. That would be great if it happened. But, it says in the story that he's feeling sad now. Well, that's too bad. All the sadness that he caused, all the angst, the suing of the grandmother who had bought club seats and ran into the market crash with the real estate and wasn't able to pay for the tickets, and they sued her. The water dripping out of the pipes on top of the club seats, which they said, oh, no, that's not sewage, that's rainwater. The railing that collapsed when people were trying to lean over and get Jalen Hurts' autograph as the Eagles quarterback was going off the field. I mean, and that's all on him. That's all on him. So it's just interesting to hear two national guys, because if you want to have some fun hearing about Snyder being, thrown through the thrashes. I did a podcast with Zabe. Zabe, it's called the Zabecast, and I do that generally with him every week. And we spent a lot of time on the Snyder article yesterday. So if you want to hear that, you can go to the Zabecast. Anyway, as for the fan base now, and this was a big part of what they did. I would have to say that ownership has to look back on this season, and it's their first real full season as owners. I don't really count 2023 because they took over just a week before training camp. But you got to say they went 4 for 4, right? General manager, check. Coach, check. Quarterback, big check. And fan base re-engaged. Big thing. And that was part of yesterday's season-ending news conferences and locker clean-out. First, Dan Quinn on what he was able to observe about the fan base. And, Joe Gibbs spent a lot of time cultivating the fan base, and the fan base was already rabid by the time he got here. I mean, it was impossible to get tickets to RFK Stadium even before he started winning Super Bowls. And once he did, forget about it. I remember going to games where, no shows were 3. And if you were lucky to get a ticket, you had to pay a lot through a scalper. They didn't have the various websites that they have now. But it was a tough ticket. People fought over them in divorces and wills and all that stuff. And now to have re-engaged the fan base as quickly as they have, and to have it supporting them not just at home but on the road, this was Quinn on that yesterday.
From a home game perspective, it was Atlanta was the one. For whatever reason, I think, and Trust even referenced this, we were losing, I believe, at the half. and to hear the crowd erupt, like feeling the support behind them, like you can't help but to win. And so to know that, and then saw burgundy down in gold in Dallas, and then in Tampa, and smidgens of it in Detroit. And again, yesterday, we feel it. We feel it, and we know how important football is to this community. And so to know that we're a part of that, man, it's really awesome.
Yeah, I've said this about D.C., where I've spent most of my life. I worked in other markets. I worked in New York, and I worked in Dallas and San Antonio, where they have professional teams. But it's really different here with the football team because you have a lot of transplanted people because of government and so forth. You got a lot of people who grew up here and are second and third generation and all that. But the way that this team can galvanize a city of people who aren't necessarily connected to the area is really remarkable. And it takes winning to do that. And it takes more than that. It takes winning with people that you can respect. And Dan Snyder was hard to respect. It was almost a feeling when they had an occasional good season. And a couple of those were actually with Joe Gibbs. So you really were going to gravitate to that anyway because of all the great memories he left behind from the 80s and the early 90s. But, for example, the RG3 season. Yeah, there was reason to feel good about that because of RG3. But, there was also an ickiness when you saw him rolling around with Dan Snyder around town, going to shows and things like that. And then the Kirk Cousins year where they made the playoffs, I think that was 2015. You felt sort of good about it, but you didn't want Snyder to feel good. Like of all the stuff he'd dragged people through. And at that point, he'd owned the team for, 16 years? Christ, by the time we got to the end of it, it was like, God, well, maybe they're going to get good, but, boy, he's going to be tough to live with if they do it, and they had no chance to do that. The whole Ron Rivera thing, just a complete mess. Somebody's got perspective on this, and there aren't that many guys on the team who've been around for a long time. Terry McLaurin is certainly one of them. Jonathan Allen, and he's got really unique perspective since he grew up in Virginia and remembers probably the end of the good days. He's too young to remember the Super Bowl, I think. Yeah, he's probably about 30, so he wouldn't have any recollection of that. But there was still, the early days of the second Gibbs go round. He could certainly remember that. So he's got some perspective. But Sam Cosmi's from Texas, played at the University of Texas, and this is his fourth season. So he's seen just the absolute mess that was created with the Rivera era and playing games in the home field with half the stadium full and half of that crowd rooting for the other team. So he's got perspective on fans, and that was one of the things that he addressed yesterday in the locker cleanout.
One of the biggest things that, brings a joy to me is just to be able to see the fan base back and, just the love, the videos I get to see of their reactions of how we've been playing. And, I have family members that have lifelong ties to this stuff. And to see tears in their eyes and the passion and everything that brings to that. I mean, that's the joy of being able to see what we've been able to do in this short time and this season. And, I'm excited that the fact that we have expectations now because, that's cool. I mean, that's cool to have. And I'm excited for that. And I'm super grateful and thankful for everything this year has brought, the lessons and the relationships and, all the moments we've had. I mean, what a year.
Now, Cosmi, before the season, signed a 4-year, $74 million contract. I don't know how much of him we're going to see next year, if at all. Nikki Jabala's got this in the Post today about the surgery he's having on his knee today, the ACL tear. It's more than that. It's ACL reconstructive surgery. And she writes, Cosmi's timetable for return is unclear. Unlike an ACL repair, in which the ligament is sutured back together, a reconstruction uses a graft from another part of the body to replace the torn ligament. For high-level athletes, reconstruction is generally the norm, even though it's more invasive than a repair. And I think we normally, I remember what they had with Chase Young, where he missed like almost a season and a half because of reconstructive surgery. If Cosmi has it today, in 9 months, I mean, how realistic is it that he's going to be ready for even the middle of next season? I don't know. They may play it safe with him because, excuse me, he's a young player, and I think it's entirely possible that he will miss all of next season. I wouldn't be shocked by that. And, they've done a good job with plugging in linemen. They've had guys that have stepped in and guys who have been backups and played. But that's a big loss. That's a guy, and I think his loss was felt to a great degree with Graham, the way he was able to dominate the middle in Philadelphia last week. It's a good group there, I think, with Allegretti at one guard and Cosme in the other and Biotish at center. That's a good nucleus of your offensive line. And Biotish is coming back. Allegretti is coming back. I don't know if we're going to see Sam Cosme much, if at all, next season. Coming up. The ownership Michigas will blow your mind. And we had another incredible performance yesterday from Jerry Jones and Jerry's kid as they tried to excite the media by hiring Brian Schottenheimer as their head coach. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So a little news conference perspective. Yesterday, Adam Peters, the GM of the Commanders, Dan Quinn, the coach, they held a season wrap-up news conference jointly together. It was limited to 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, they answered, I think, most of the pertinent questions. There's probably a few hanging out there, but it's pretty, they covered things. The Cowboys yesterday introduced their new head coach, their big splash hire, assistant coach Brian Schottenheimer, promoted to head coach, something that they announced Friday evening. You want to bury a story? That's where you put it. But yesterday they held a news conference that lasted almost an hour and a half. I have not been to a coach hiring news conference that ever lasted that long, but Jerry liked to talk. Jerry was yakking yesterday, and so was his dopey son, Steven, who's the president of the team. And in referring to the championship drought, the fact that they haven't been in the championship game for 30 years, Steven used air quotes. No. That's a real thing, a drought. 30 years is a drought. You don't put air quotes over drought when it's 30 years, and that's what he did. And then Jerry, in justifying with other big names out there how he could go with a career assistant who was already on the staff, Brian Schottenheimer, and get people jazzed up about that.
Now, I get my proverbial ass kicked over needing people in my comfort zone. Without this thing being about me in any way, if you don't think I can't operate out of my comfort zone, you're so wrong. It's unbelievable. This is as big a risk as you could take. As big a risk as you could take. No head coaching experience. Now, let me share something with you. With all of that, you've just heard him reference his osmosis, his family. Anybody in this room that doesn't believe the apple doesn't go far from the tree has missed it someplace down the road, especially if there was an effort to make it that way, and there was an effort. But then you go around to the countless numbers of coaches that Schotty has served on staff with and been around, the countless players. How often do you have someone that has 25, I'm going to say 25, it may be 26, of years of working through the human relationship and working, aspiring to learn, of have his ears and eyes wide open and looking for techniques and looking for things that make coaches better.
That's kind of a backhanded compliment. It's a big risk taking somebody who's got no head coaching experience. This is a business where there's a lot of nepotism. The guys who are sons of get opportunities, and sometimes they do very well with those opportunities. We've seen that time again. Kyle Shanahan, an example of that. There are others out there. So after 25 years with the last name Schottenheimer, nobody's really been interested in hiring him as a head coach until Jerry promotes him and then tries to sell that. There was one answer to a question where he went 11 minutes, rambling Jerry going 11 minutes for a coach who he hopes will break, air quotes, the drought. Ownership, you would think, and I don't know if there's another business like this, but this is a business where you have multi-billionaire owners who've been very successful doing something else, I guess, unless they have inherited the money, and they're complete buffoons running their team. Jerry's been better than Snyder for sure, and he hit it out of the park at the beginning when he hired Jimmy Johnson, but he decided to get rid of Jimmy and gutted a team and wound up with, Coach Gunsmoke, Barry Switzer, and they won another Super Bowl. That was Jimmy's team, and everybody knew that. And since then, look at what he's done. Louis Riddick, he doesn't mention the owner by name here, but he did spend some time in the Redskins front office when Dan Snyder owned the team. And Louis Riddick yesterday, in discussing owners on the Dan Patrick Show, said this.
I remember at one time having an owner say to me, quote, "It's football. How hard can it be?" And that's the kind of arrogance that a lot of those guys have when it comes to, look at this game. It's just a bunch of guys who are running around in pads, hitting. Just give me the best players. Give me the coach that everyone says the greatest, and throw the football, score some touchdowns, keep them healthy. If they're not, we'll get someone else, and just keep it going. Sometimes people look at it like that. They don't think it deserves the same, that it has the same kind of nuance or deserves the same kind of attention or requires the same kind of mental horsepower that it requires to run Microsoft or Apple, or be a company that's a Fortune 500 company that makes billions of dollars a year. They don't think it's that intricate. But those are usually the ones who wind up on the outside looking in, looking for coaches every single year, wondering why can't I get there? Why can't I be in the Super Bowl, where now all the eyes are on me? Because they want to do it their way.
Yeah, I think there's an example this year of how to build a team, and Adam Peters getting off to a great start. There's a scene in the movie Miracle where Kurt Russell plays Herb Brooks about the 1980 Olympic team, and they have a 3-day tryout where they're bringing in college players from all over the country. And after the first day, Herb Brooks, Kurt Russell as Herb Brooks, he should have won an Academy Award for that. He nailed him. He says to his assistant, who later was in that show, The Americans, remember The Americans? He says to his assistant, yeah, I have my team. And he goes, wait a minute, after one day you were able to pick the best players? He says, I don't want the best players. I want the right players. And that's what it is in picking a football team. Yeah, sure. You want to get a draft pick that turns out to be like Jaden Daniels. I mean, there's no question about that, and that's a big part of the process. And sometimes signing a big-time free agent is helpful, though by and large, if you try to build your team like that, it doesn't work. And that's what Dan Snyder tried to do. I'll just get the best players. I'll get the best coach. I'll pay him the most money, and I'll win, and everybody will love me. Now, doesn't work that way. And Jerry's been chasing this for the last 30 years. It's his team. He's made a fortune on it. It's worth probably $10 billion more, maybe more if he put it on the open market for a team that he bought for less than $200 million. And he's had a lot to do with the financial success of the league, showing them how to take on partnerships and things like that. But you got to know what you don't know. And you can't let your ego rule the day, and that's what we got going on here. And then, his big splash hire is a guy he knows he can push around in Brian Schottenheimer, because there ain't nobody else going to give him a job as a head coach, 25, 26 years as an assistant. And it's not like, some of these other assistants who have been, particularly outstanding that get these opportunities. He's not. He's just been a guy who's been known as a pretty good assistant, and he's Marty's kid. And, Marty was great. Marty did a phenomenal job of the 1 year he was allowed to stay here under Snyder. But the fact of the matter is, Marty never got a team to a Super Bowl. Never did. Won his one championship as a coach in the UFL. And so when he says the apple doesn't far from the tree, yes, Marty was an outstanding coach. Doesn't mean that Brian is going to be an outstanding coach. And then you had this. This is right out of Curb Your Enthusiasm. The Jacksonville Jaguars introduced their new coach yesterday. His name is Liam Cohen. And he has been with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, did a really good job there as the offensive coordinator. And he originally interviewed with Jacksonville, as the offseason began, as their offseason began after they were beaten by the Commanders. And the owners of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers said, well, why don't you just stay here in Tampa? We'll make you the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL. And, okay, he did that. He agreed to that. And in the meantime, the Buccaneers had to fulfill the Rooney Rule and interview minorities. In the meantime, Cohn went out and signed on as head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars and then opened his news conference yesterday with something bizarre. I'm not sure what this was about. Maybe he recognized somebody he knew, but it was Duval. And then after basically screwing over the Buccaneers, agreeing to stay for a contract extension that makes him rich, he slips out the back door and goes back and signs with Jacksonville anyway and said this about his plan as head coach of the Jags.
And that's really what this is going to come down to is honesty. I want to surround ourselves with people that are going to be able to tell you hard truths, be able to show you your blind spots, because that's really, like I mentioned, where growth occurs, when you can truly be yourself and be honest with looking in the mirror, knowing that process to get you there was clean and it was right, and the results will speak for themselves.
I'm a big fan of honesty. I like honesty a lot. I try to be honest myself. But when you've basically given the slip up to your previous employer, let them down one path and then took another, and you're going to talk about a clean, honest process? Who are you kidding? What are you kidding about? And yeah, he did a great job with Baker Mayfield. Maybe he can revive Trevor Lawrence. I don't know. Trevor Lawrence one time was thought to be the big savior for Jacksonville. He's played well and got the contract extension, but hasn't played as well recently. And like Mayfield, number one pick of the draft, maybe he can do that for him. But how can you talk about honesty with what you did in your previous move? How can you possibly do that? And Liam Cohn, it's C-O-E-N, not C-O-H-E-N. Liam Cohn. We'll see what works here, but he's not somebody I would trust. I don't think the Buccaneers people feel like they can trust him very much. And he's talking about trust and honesty and clean process. That's a clean process where you interview with one team, they say, "Oh, don't take that job. Stay here. Here's money. Okay, I'll do that." No. Oh, left anyway. So that'll be one to watch. The only one that's open is the Saints, and does not appear that Cliff Kingsbury is high on their list right now. But, sometimes candidates come out of nowhere like, hey, Brian Schottenheimer. You never know. All right, coming up, much more reaction from Locker Cleanout Day yesterday, and also some Super Bowl preview and a lot more. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. I'm going to get to Super Bowl ticket prices shortly. Little hint, they're thousands of dollars. No surprise there. Just thinking about the Kansas City Chiefs fans. This is our fifth Super Bowl in 6 years. Where are you coming up with that guilt? I've told my story many times. 4 tickets together in the end zone. Super Bowl 17, January of 83, one of the great sports experiences of my life. $40 a piece, face value. I don't even know what face value is right now. I was looking that up. I can't find it. But it's well over $1,000. It's well over probably $2,000. And I just wonder where people who are rabid fans are coming up with this cash. I guess if you have oodles and oodles of money, it's not a big deal. But at one time, the Super Bowl was affordable. It was, for some fans, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You don't know how many times your team is going to get to a Super Bowl. In some cases, there's a one-time, and some have never been there. The Cleveland Browns haven't been there. The Detroit Lions have never made a Super Bowl. And, so you're willing to spend more than you normally would. But Kansas City Chiefs fans, it's every year. And maybe they set aside in their family budget how much money they can spend each year. And they know that their team is going to be in the mix every year. Whether they get there or not is, still up to chance. There's still a possibility they don't. But I wonder about that. And going this year to New Orleans to see him play in the Super Bowl, where you've traveled all over the place in the past few years, if you've gone to multiple Super Bowls, what does it mean? And I'll tell you something else. Man, when your team gets to the Super Bowl and loses, that is the worst. That is the absolute worst. And I have a good friend who's a big Giants fan, and he's been to multiple Super Bowls. I remember seeing him before the one against Baltimore in 2001, where the Ravens absolutely destroyed them. They destroyed the Giants. I believe the score was 34-7, if I'm not mistaken. And to have spent all that money and to have gone to a game, it's a great place. It was in Tampa. That's a great place for a Super Bowl. But to spend all that money and watch your team like that, oh, man, that's a long trek home. And he also told me, though, that there is the spoils of when you win one, and he remembers when Scott Norwood was wide right in the Super Bowl, Super Bowl 25, the year before the Redskins won their last one. And they're pulling out of the parking lot. They got a rental car, of course. I think it's in Tampa, and they're getting ready to go back to the airport or the hotel. Like they're from New York. And they see a Winnebago in front of them, and it's got New York plates on it, meaning New York Buffalo Bills. They had Bills stickers all over the car. It wasn't Giant fan. And he said, boy, they got a long ride home. They really do, and God knows what they spent on tickets. It's a lot different, the pricing, the way it was in that year, which was, 1990? 91, January of 1991. Anyway, let's get back to the locker cleanout yesterday at Ashburn, which is, as they say, bittersweet. And speaking of a guy who understands what it's like to go to Super Bowls, he had been to 4 of them in his 5 years in Kansas City. Really remarkable, winning 3 Super Bowl championships. Nick Allegretti, and he's been in the league championship game, AFC, NFC, for every year of his career. And he knows what locker cleanout is like when it's really good after winning a Super Bowl, when it's bad after they lose one, which they did, and after a year that they don't get to one. And this was how he explained what it was like cleaning out his locker yesterday in Ashburn.
It's a weird day, always a weird day. Because there's a lot of unknown. You don't know who's coming back and what this team's going to look like next year, from player to staff, coaches. It's going to change. There's going to be change. So it's always kind of a weird day. You're saying bye, but you don't know if it's bye for a month or 2 or a couple of years. And I see you when we play on another team in a couple. So it's that part of it's always different. Win or lose at the end of the year, it's always a tough one. Like, you say goodbye, and then you're like, I don't know when I'm going to see that guy again. So that part's always tough. But so you just try to really appreciate and enjoy the time that you had, and probably go out to dinner with the O-line this week and have a couple of good times there, and just enjoy the room that we had this year.
Yeah, Dan Quinn said that after the game in Philly, and I don't know whether he meant, stay in the locker room for a long time. I know they got back at 9:30 on Sunday night, so the game ended 6:30-ish. It's probably a 45-minute flight. So I don't know how much time they had to spend together. And then yesterday, they want to get all their crap out of there. They're cleaning out their locker. They're boxing it up. A lot of times they're shipping it to the cities where they live in the off-season. Jaden Daniels is an L.A. guy. I assume he's going to spend some time out there. He lives here with his mother, by the way. You may know that. And his mother looks out for him. She said something about making sure the girls don't put their hooks into him. But he's a guy who turned this town on. I mean, he really did. I can't remember an athlete who's really done this. Maybe the equivalent of this, and this is something I didn't really experience, and I can barely remember it. But the Baltimore Bullets. I know it's a different sport, and it's a different city, and it's a totally different situation. But the Baltimore Bullets had been a losing team. They had come to Baltimore from Chicago in 1963. They had been the Chicago Zephyrs, and they became the Baltimore Bullets. And they were a bad team for a while, bad enough to be drafting high in the draft. And in picking number 2 in 1967, they took Earl Monroe, who was a great player, Hall of Fame player, flashy player, fun to watch, but they weren't very good. Wes Unseld comes in 1968, and they're good. They make the playoffs for the first time since coming to Baltimore. He wins not only Rookie of the Year, but MVP. The only other player who's ever done that is Wilt Chamberlain. I think Jaden Daniels is hands down to win the Rookie of the Year. Probably won't win MVP, but for what he did for this team, I don't think any other player lifted his franchise as much as Daniels did. And so he's also very low key. You know, he's only going to give you what he's going to give you. And as Dan Quinn said, inside the visor of that helmet is a trained killer. I mean, he's just going to give you the minimum information. But this was about the highlight part. He talked for about 4 minutes yesterday to reporters. This is about a minute of that, explaining what was meaningful to him this year and what he's going to take pride in as he takes a couple of months off before resuming training.
Just the resilience, not just me personally, but just the whole team. You know, those guys going out there and fighting to the end of the game.
What's your perspective on, or will you share your perspective to Adam as he, builds this roster to improve next year?
You know, if conversations like that happen right now, man, I'm just focused on what I can do right now. You know, I trust Adam and those guys to go out there and do what they got to do. So, you know, my full trust is in them.
Are there things that you already know you want to work on going in the offseason?
I mean, like I said, I haven't really sat down and thought about or mapped out anything in the offseason yet. But, you know, when that time will come, it will come.
Jaden, in a season filled with so many incredible games, moments, is there one that stands out for you?
Obviously, I'll say like a bright spot. Obviously, your first win in the NFL. It's very hard to win, and you know, the first playoff win was probably standing out the most.
No, that was a great one. The playoff win. The first win that he had was against the Giants in the second game of the season. Remember, they lost the opener at Tampa, and it was a lopsided game. But remember that he was Rookie of the Week in that game, and the New York Giants game, which was Week 2. Which was all field goals. They had 7 field goals to win that game. Couldn't get it in the end zone. But he did score. He did lead them down to those scores. And, you know, I guess that you would look at that, you know, you come in the league with winning as a goal. He had better games. I would have thought, you know, most people would say, well, what's the highlight? The highlight to me is beating Detroit to get to the NFC Championship game. Or if you want to talk about exciting moments, it's the Hail Mary to beat the Bears. I mean, there were a lot of things like that, but that was an interesting answer on that. Also, on the question about advising Adam Peters on the roster, thank you very much. I remember LeVar Arrington feeling like he should have say in personnel for the team. No. You let the football people run the operation. Jaden Daniels, yeah, he has friends in the league, but he's not going to lobby, you know, got to get this receiver here, got to get this guy here. No, good. And their guys are going to want to come here, too. This is a totally new day that you want to play with this quarterback and you want to play in an organization which is running things properly. And you don't want a quarterback. I believe, I want to be fair about this, but I believe Caleb Williams said in his season-closing news conference that he did want to have input on player personnel. What does he know? Yeah, he knows guys he played with, played against, but these guys are pros. They do this year-round. This is an occupation, analyzing talent. Leave it up to Quinn and his staff to pick the players. Good. I got trust in them. Good. That's exactly what you want to hear from your star quarterback. A couple of other things. Tyler Biadasz, probably very happy to be here and not in that mess that Dallas is in. He discussed about the foundation that he's seen laid this year.
Absolutely. I think the standard's set, and for what we've done this season and how we've grown throughout the whole season, I think it just amplifies of what we're capable of doing and how we're going to get down next year. And again, like I said before, it's going to sting, you know, but once April comes, like, we've got to remember how that felt and to go right into 2025 with head full of steam.
Yeah, Biadasz, I think, was their best offensive lineman this year, and you saw the difference when he wasn't playing. So him staying healthy is going to be a big part of their success next year. I don't know about Sam Cosmi's availability. He's having a reconstructive knee surgery today. I think it's quite possible he could miss all or maybe certainly a big part of next season. I mean, it could be like, you know, Chase Young. Chase Young after he had his knee surgery, and he was hurt earlier in the year. It was like mid-season of his second year. Didn't come back until there were 3 games left in his third year, and then they elected not to pick up the option. I believe he's going to be a free agent this year. You talk about pass rushers. I don't think they want to bring him back, and I think the fact that he's local is probably not a good thing. But Chase Young will be out there in pass rushers, and he still can do that. I just think that the way he handled himself here, where he was more interested in making commercials and making himself a big star and he did not participate in the off-season workouts, which is not going to fly here now. But that's if you're just comparing the knee injuries. I don't know, how the rehab is going to go with Cosme, but it is going to be reconstructive, and it's a pretty serious operation. Last thing from Quinn, Dan Quinn, and this is about, he's got a variety of sayings, but there's one in particular that the players really mentioned yesterday in cleaning out their lockers and how meaningful it was to them this year.
Anybody, anywhere, anytime. It's really the life of a competitor, and like if that's our central theme that we want here of competing, that's really where it started. Whether it's playing on the East Coast, night games, day, anywhere, that all of the opponents got the same regard. And like they were going to get all of us and how we would go do that. And so it really was about us, even though it's anybody, it was really our way. And this is how we will go do things. And so I wanted them to take that life of a competitor and apply it to our whole team. And in different ways, that's just how we would want to get down. And I'm glad that they shared that one with you today, because if there's one, that probably resonates with me as well into that spot. But it really is about us, even though the message has anybody, but it's like how we do things.
That's Dan Quinn yesterday at the news conference to wrap up the season. I guess the next time we'll hear from him is at the Combine next month, and then you got the off season where you have the free agents coming in. And then they get back to off-season workouts in April. The off-season is very short, and it gets shorter when you go this far in the playoffs. And the disappointment of that maybe drives them next year. But, sometimes it's you're already behind. The body's healing are already 3 weeks behind everybody else or most teams in the league right now. And it may take time for them to get back. But, 4 for 4 this year. General manager, coach, quarterback, re-engaging the fan base, and an organization that you can be proud of. And, just for the, I don't know. I mean, people want to put the thoughts of Dan Snyder behind him, but it's human nature to look back. And as Tony has said a number of times when I worked with him, he said, success is a lot better when your enemies are failing. And the lengthy piece about Dan Snyder being all upset that the team is winning, the quote from an unnamed source close to him, he effing hates it. and that there's sadness, and he's got denial and all that, that's and then to find out what a jerk he was. Well, he was a jerk the whole time, but what a jerk he was when they were closing the sale and he didn't want to give up the numbers to his account so the money could be wired in. And finally, Joe Gibbs was the one who talked him into it. One of the sources said, if not for Joe Gibbs, this deal doesn't go through. Could you imagine that, by the way? I was just thinking that. Think about that. Think that we learned, this was April of 2023. We learned that there was a working agreement with the Josh Harris group, that it was going to happen. We knew that the team was going to be for sale about 6 months earlier, that they were looking to sell a piece of the team or all of the team. They weren't going to get a partner. They were going to sell the team. And we learned that it's going to be the Harris Group, and things move along to the point where it's going to be announced at the owners' meetings in Minneapolis in July of 2023. And if you read the Don Van Natta, Seth Wickersham story, you'll see that the deal was close to falling apart at the end because of the petulance of Snyder, who didn't want to sell and had to be talked into giving up the numbers to his account at the last second. They didn't get that done till 4 o'clock in the morning. And they announced the sale maybe 9, 10 in the morning in Minneapolis. Can you imagine if we got to that point where we're, finally we're rid of this guy. Yeah. And then, oh, no. Something happened at the last minute. He decided not to sell. You're stuck with him. Can you imagine what that would have been? Because as it was, they had to live with the Ron Rivera regime for another year. It was too late to make a change by the time they took over. So they go back to that, and Snyder the owner, and nobody showing up at the games, and no improvements to the stadium. Oh, my God. Man. Thank you, Joe Gibbs. Whenever there is another Super Bowl, he deserves a ring. I'll probably get one anyway. But for ridding the franchise of Dan Snyder for good, that deserves a ring for sure. All right, that is a wrap for me. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.